can take on in Uganda also include commercial farming and value addition, as well as the manufacture of inputs such as fertilizers and pesticides. Bedson Mumbere, Smart 24.
Uganda has politically been able to stabilize if it comes to the political and the security in the country, which has helped out most of the investors to come in here and invest with all the availability of the security. So clearly, what the Germany ambassador and what the officials were actually talking about and identifying was looking at how safe are the investors in the country. Previously, when you look at one of the scenarios that happened when one of the German delegates was grabbed of his belongings by someone on the streets of Kampala. This happened daily. You've seen when you're moving on the streets of Kampala, and maybe if you're new in here and someone actually identifies, not only in Kampala, meanwhile in almost all streets of developing countries, this still happens. Someone can actually come and grab off your situation. Now, a potential investor considering investing in Uganda will find a highly liberalized economy in which all sectors are open for investment and there is a free movement of capital to and from the country. And efforts have been made to ease investments. Consequently, the Ugandan Parliament in 1991 they came up with Uganda Investment Authority, UIA, a one-stop center for all investors into Uganda. The mission of the UIA, the Uganda Investment Authority, is to promote and facilitate investment projects from all the various investors, to create room for them to come through the country and bridge a gap of making sure that they add more of the investments in the country. Still, the State Minister of Foreign Affairs, Henry Luke Oriem, says Uganda is ready to provide conducive business environment, and one of the things that the government made sure was to see that they create a safe atmosphere for the investors by creating a security-free environment for them. Because for any investor who is coming from the foreign countries would want to come to Uganda and then find out that the country is safe for them to carry on with business, and that is if there is security that is going to safeguard them, because life is quite important and your property has to be safeguarded as well. So to create room for the investors to come and invest, security had to first be identified as key by the president. And if you look at the situation, the Ugandan deputy head of mission in Germany, Dan Sozi, emphasizes discipline within Ugandans, that whenever we have investors, be it those coming in from the African continent or those coming in from abroad, we need to have discipline towards these investors. They are creating opportunities for others to actually get themselves jobs. So at the end of the day, when we are creating room, we need to maintain the discipline, as it will actually help out in enabling other investors to come and bridge a gap of the unemployment in Uganda. So we need these investments to continuously come in, and at the end of the day, it will be very helpful to all of us. Away from that, let's move on to the next one. As the Minister of State for ICT and National Guidance, Joyce Nabosa Sebugwao, has issued a directive to National Information and Technology Authority, NITA Uganda, to reduce the cost of internet consumed by the business processing, outsourcing and innovation companies. She announced the directive at the launch of the Business Processing, Outsourcing and Innovation Council at the ministry head offices in Kampala. More of the details.
I congratulate you. Thank you so much for accepting to be the chairman. The Uganda ICT sector is one of the most competitive and the fastest growing sectors in the country. ICT services alone contribute 2.5% of Uganda's GDP. And this is growing each year. We need this to translate into more jobs for our young people. BPO and innovation sector, I direct as follows. 1, reduction of cost of internet. The National Information Technology Authority Uganda, NITAU, is directed to reduce the cost of internet and the BPO and innovation companies consume. Currently, BPOs purchase 1 unit of internet that is called MBs at $35. This should be reduced to $25. Dr. Zawid.
The Honorable Minister's speech, she said this reduction should take effect as soon as possible. And as soon as possible means that we are going to, as the PS and the team at the ministry concerned, we are looking into all the options that we have to consider to reduce this cost, and we don't want to go beyond next year. So the answer is we cannot be later than the beginning of next year, but we're going to make sure that we do it sooner than later. We won't go beyond January 2022. On whether it is internet across the board, private or government internet, the statement, I think, was clear. We are offering incentives of reduction to BPO companies that have been established, and these are the ones that we offer government connectivity by government. You know, government has a national backbone infrastructure that provides internet, and we have control over that and what it costs. So we are going to consider the cost of internet for government to these entities. But we know that the trend is if government puts its costs down, the private sector also plays along or takes the same trend. So eventually, the cost will come down relatively lower compared to what we have now, even with the private.
That is where we're actually getting into after the break, when we're heading into our topical this analysis, as we break down NITA Uganda, internet costs in Uganda, as well as how can we reduce these costs of internet to help develop the e-commerce sector in Uganda. Away from that, lastly from the local scene, the civil society organizations have requested the Bank of Uganda to show how it intends to use $490 million obtained from the International Monetary Fund under the special drawing rights. Speaking at a dialogue in Kampala, Jen Nalunga, the Siatini Executive Director, says the decision on how the funds will be used is too important to be made without public input. The details. Under the special drawing rights, which is a form of unconditional financing to International Monetary Fund member states, Uganda was availed with 1.7 trillion Ugandan shillings to finance COVID-19 responses and economic recovery. Speaking at the same event, Penny Mbabazi, an aid and debt expert, says that the proper use and consequent accountability has been left solely to the Central Bank and the Finance Ministry, with limited involvement of Parliament, civil society and the media. She said puts money under special drawing rights at the risk of being used for debt repayment rather than being used to support economic recovery. However, Bank of Uganda Director Research Adam Mugume dismissed the claim that the Central Bank had, through various media platforms, explained the role of special drawing rights, saying government was at liberty to use the money as it deems fit. One way to use the special drawing right allocations, Dr. Mugume said, was to build buffers for unseen eventualities rather than spend it now. During the meeting, 7 MPs led by Silas Agon, the Kumi Municipality MP, expressed ignorancy of any allocation done under special drawing rights. This is the second time in over a decade Uganda has been granted permissions by the International Monetary Fund to access money under the special drawing rights to, among others, deal with emergencies as well as support economic recovery. Julius Kapwepwe, a debt analyst, said there was need for government to present a comprehensive COVID-19 recovery plan for the short and medium term, capturing how funds under the special drawing rights will be used. This is the second time in over a decade Uganda has been granted permission by the International Monetary Fund to access money under the special drawing rights to, among others, deal with emergencies as well as support economic recovery. Away from that, let's check out what is happening from the international news. As Kenya's economy grew 10.1% in the first 6 months of the year, according to the Kenya National Bureau of Standards, the KNBS. Kenya's economy rebounded strongly in the second quarter of the financial year, with the real GDP growing by 10.1%, supported by the ease of the COVID-19 containment measures. The details.
In his statement upon the release of the much-delayed economic data, National Treasury CS Ukare Yatani said the reopening of schools and the transport sector were leading contributors to the growth that softened in the first 3 months of the year. Sectors that supported the overall growth in the second quarter included manufacturing with 9.6%, education 67.6%, transportation and storage 16.9%, information and communication 25.2%, and other services 20.2%. There was a slowdown in the performance of agriculture, forestry, and fishing activities in the first and second quarters of 2021. The sector contracted by 0.9% in the second quarter of 2021 compared to a growth of 4.9% in the corresponding quarter of 2020. Credit advance to enterprises in manufacturing activity declined by 0.9% to stand at 1.2 trillion shilling. The performance of the construction sector was relatively slower in the second quarter, recording a relative growth of 6.5% compared to 8.2% last year. Even so, cement consumption increased by 29.3% to 2,078.8 thousand metric tons, pointing to the sustenance of performance in economic activities in the sector. The electricity and water supply sector grew by 5.2% compared to a 4.7% contraction in the second quarter of 2020. The total electricity generated increased from 2,634.9 million kilowatt hours in 2020 to 2,975.8 million kilowatt hours in the quarter under review. The increase in electricity generation was notable from the all sources except geothermal. Electricity generated from both thermal and wind expanded about 69% compared to a contraction of 64.9% and 29.3% in the same quarter of 2020. Electricity generated from hydro increased by 4.6% to stand at 994.9 million kilowatt hours in the second quarter of 2021. The transportation and storage sector reported a growth of 16.9% compared to a contraction of 16.8% in the corresponding quarter of 2020. The broad money supply expanded from 3.9 trillion shillings as at the end of June 2020 to 4.1 trillion shillings as at the end of June 2021. Net foreign assets reduced from 887.4 billion shillings in Q2 last year to 781.9 billion shillings by the end of
Kenya's broad money supply expanded from 3.9 trillion shillings as at the end of June 2020 to 4.1 trillion shillings at the end of June 2021. Net foreign assets reduced from 887.4 billion shillings in quarter 2 last year to 781.9 billion shillings by the end of June this year. That is, we are speaking Kenyan shillings. As you will definitely see, UFAT, as we are definitely speaking Kenyan shillings. And if you look at the statement upon the release of the much delayed economic data, National Treasury said in the reopening of schools and the transport sector that they were the leading contributors to the growth that softened in the first 3 months of the year. Away from Kenya, let's move on to the next story as Tesla drops 12% as investors brace for possible Musk stock sell. Elon Musk's Twitter poll asked voters last weekend if he could sell 10% of his stock, of his stake in the electric vehicle company. And tell you what, 57% of the poll was saying yes, was agreeing to what he asked for. More of the details.
Tesla Inc. lost nearly $175 billion from its valuation, heading for the biggest two-day slide in 14 months as the surge in shares lost momentum amid a host of negative news. The drumbeat of adverse headlines reached crescendo after Elon Musk's Twitter poll that asked voters over the weekend if he should sell off 10% of his stake in the electric vehicle company. was followed by news of both his brother Kimball selling some of the shares just before the poll. There was also a Business Insider report on Michael Burry, the investor made famous by Big Short movie, saying Musk may want to sell stocks to cover his personal debt. Despite the latest drop, Tesla is still up to 46% this year and has held above $1 trillion in market value, a key level it hit in late October. Most of those gains come after the company reported strong results and delivery numbers for the third quarter, significantly beating market expectation as rental car company Haas Global Holdings Incorporation placed a big order for Tesla cars for its fleet. Matthew Melly, chief marketing strategist at Miller Tabak Plus Company, said the sell-off in Tesla's shares was part of the normal and healthy pullback. He called it a reaction to a very overbought condition. Chipmaker Nvidia Corp latest push into self-driving cars could have added further pressure on Tesla as the EV makers age over competitors in autonomous driving technologies, often cited as a big reason behind its premium multiple. According to 57.9% of the people who voted for this Twitter poll, asking users of the social media network whether he should offload the stake, Tesla CEO Elon Musk should sell about 10% of his Tesla stock. The world's richest person tweeted on Saturday that he would often offload 10% of his stock if users approved the proposal in a poll. The world's richest person had said that he would abide by the results of the poll. As of June 30th, Musk's shareholding, Tesla came to about 170.5 million shares, and selling 10% would amount to close to $21 billion based on Friday's closing, according to the Reuters calculations.
The world's richest person tweeted on Saturday of last weekend that he would offload 10% of his stock if users approved the proposal in a poll. And trust me, 57.9% of the poll was saying, hey, sell 10% of that stock. And according to it, the world's richest person had said that he would abide by the result of the poll, which was saying 57. If you look at the people who retaliated, who actually came up with the answer saying, yes, sell the 10% of it. And as he's actually living on that way, Tesla is dropping 12% as investors brace for possible Musk stock sell. I'm Joran Posonko and I'm Smart24. I'm coming back after the break with more from the topical analysis. It's a situation of the internet, the costs, and much more.